Hi everybody, this is Nick from Man from Soul, and today I want to talk to you guys a bit about sidechain compression and how you can approach it in a bit of a more surgical fashion. So here I have a very simple bass that I have from my Glitch with Friends Volume 2 pack. This is one of mine. And then I have a kick hitting on every beat. It is a glunk glunk kick. So here's the kick, and then here's a bass. So obviously you don't want to have a kick and a bass playing at the same time fighting each other for the low end. If you want to have the sub in your kick come through and not be clashing with this, you need to do some form of reduction of volume of the bass while the kick is playing. And the most common method to do that is sidechain compression, which for those of you who are not aware, it is taking a compressor. Let's unpause this. And what you do, you give it a really aggressive compression. So you set the threshold really low, you set the ratio really high, and then but what you're doing is that you have a sidechain coming into it, and that's basically a signal that there's a range of compression here from 0 being no compression to 100 being the compression level you have set, and how much of that compression it applies is proportional to the signal, I guess the volume of the signal, that the sidechain signal that you're inputting. So if we just straight up sidechain compress the bass to the kick, this is what it sounds like. So as we can see here, can I pause? Okay, it pauses. As you can see here, every time the kick hits, this thing just ducks right out of the way, comes right back, and the speed at which it comes back is dependent on the release knob. I'm not going to go into that in this video though. This works. This, especially with this kind of 4 on the floor housey techno type beat, you get that kind of pumping which some people want. And if that's what you want for the type of music you make, by all means do that. But for the type of music I make, I don't like that pumping usually. That's not usually how I approach things. So I need something that doesn't just take my bass completely out of the listener's range, but still leaves room for the kick. So I'm gonna go ahead and mute that. And then I have a patch that I have here, and a couple people have asked me to do a video specifically on this, so here's the video. I called this, what the hell do I even call it? Low end sidechain split, that's what I call it. So it's called low end sidechain split because I'm splitting the signal into 2 halves, the low end and the high end, and then I'm sidechain compressing the lower end. So let's go over what's going on here in this patcher. So I have a knob, it's just called the cut knob. So this is where my 2 cutoffs are going to be, and I'll show you what that means in a sec. So that knob is going to control the X modulator of this envelope controller. And so what's going on is that inside envelope controller you have these 2 macros, X and Y, and you can for all 5 of these articulators you can have a macro curve, and so this curve is when you have X at 0, you are getting a signal of 0%, and then when you put X all the way up to its maximum value, you're outputting a signal of 100%. This is a control signal, it's not audio. And so you can do that for all of these articulators and give them different curves. If you see here on Articulator 2, I actually have it so that the lowest value of my X range is slightly higher than 1. However, they conclude on the same point. You don't necessarily have to do that. I believe I did that because the way that I didn't want any sort of like phase interference by having them directly on the same frequency, but whether that actually achieves what I think it does, I don't know. I'm not a DSP expert, so I could be wrong about that. So it could also be that, because I made this a long time ago, it could also be that I did this because it sounded a bit better when you move the knob around. I don't remember. But do whatever you think sounds best, because that's the motto here. We do what sounds best to us. So Articulator 1 is going here to control the position of a high pass filter. So if we move the cut knob, you see that it's moving the high pass filter around. If we go back to the Articulator 2, we see that the cut knob moves a low pass filter around. And and those are both being controlled at the same time with the same knob. However, the only one of them is going into this compressor. And here we have a really hardcore, compression. We have just -60 threshold, which is very quiet, and a massive 20-to-1 ratio. You don't have to make it that extreme if you don't want to, it's up to you, but I have it extreme because I can afford to be really extreme on my sidechain compression because I'm only compressing a certain part of the bass sound. I'm not compressing the whole thing. So I'm not losing out by just going ham on this. I'll show you what that means in a sec. So just to clarify the routing on this, you can have additional inputs, or sorry, I guess outputs. Yeah. So, I mean, when you input something to a mixer channel, so such as I have this kick input here onto mixer channel 3, which has my bass linked to it, you can then in Patcher bring that out. So you go outputs, audio, and then you select everything that you want to have to be able to route. And so then from there, I bring that into an input on the Fruity limiter, which is our compressor. To do that, you can do inputs and then audio, and then you can add as many as you want for as many inputs as you want. But you don't really need more than 2. I don't know of any uses for more than 2. You can also activate parameters here, but that's not relevant. So, and then in here, inside the compressor, we have, we set our settings, a really low threshold, really high ratio. And then we want our sidechain signal to be the input 1, which it unfortunately doesn't give you the exact name, but that corresponds to this kick. Yeah, and so I can actually give the Fruity state file for this entire patcher in the description. I think I'm going to do that. So if you want to just snag this, go for it. Yeah, and so then as we see, the output gets routed out of the sidechain compressed signal, and then the high pass portion is always out. There's no modification, it's just coming straight out. And so that basically means that every time the kick hits, we're completely compressing the low portion of it, anything below where we set this cutoff knob. And again, you set this just kind of to taste. And then everything above that is coming out just fine. So let's listen to what that sounds like. So that's cool. So what's going on there is the bass never really goes away, because there's always the higher end of it is there, like everything above the knob. This is probably a better position for it than where I had it. And so what happens is that the effect that this has is that instead of having like a pumping kind of bass, your track sounds more full, but you're not sacrificing mix clarity so much, because you're still making room in the low end, but now you don't lose that kind of high end power that's going on. And if you make really kind of congested music like I do, that's important. You want that. So yeah, that's how I do that, and it works really well for me. Another option, and this is my least favorite option, but I'm going to show it just because, is doing a dynamic EQ with a low shelf. And so, do I have that? Yes, I do. So this is what it looks like. And it's not terrible. I mean, it works better than nothing. And we do get that effect of leaving the higher end intact, but then only getting rid of the lower end. But you'll see that an EQ, even at its lowest setting, doesn't fully get rid of here. Let's give it another EQ here, and I'll show you what I mean. So if we bring it to here, get rid of the kick. So you'll still see there's some stuff coming through here, and it's kind of hard to hear because it's very quiet, and that may not be an issue for you, but it's not, there's still some stuff coming through, even at its lowest setting. So instead of doing that, I don't screw around with that. This is how I used to do it for the longest time, but I was not happy with how muddy my kicks and stuff were, because they were interfering too much with my basses. And I'm finding I get much more clear results with my current setup, which is this this patcher patch. So again, here's how it sounds with the patcher patch. Oh, trying to kick back on. And then as compared to the traditional sidechain compression of the whole signal. So that's about it. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments. It's relatively straightforward. I hope this helps you. It's certainly a technique I use quite a bit. Thank you and have a good day.